Hey, it's Mose, back with a video once again. The Wild's open beta test has come and gone, and I assume most of us have had our fill of playing it, assuming your PC could actually run it. I've put in a couple dozen hours into testing and trying out what's available to play. There's been many and various opinions and takes out there on Wild so far, and so in this video I want to give my take on why this game might be the best thing I've ever played. I'm going to talk about what I did in the beta, what I liked, and of course, for the betterment of the game, what I disliked. Before we get started, I do just want to point out the usual YouTube stuff. If you like the video, please do consider subscribing and leaving a like. It helps the channel a lot. I also have a playlist of my other Monster Hunter videos you will probably enjoy, so go check that out. I don't think my opinion on Wilds will mean anything if I don't first explain where I come from. I am not very subtle about the fact that I am an old-gen enjoyer. I started the series with World, but the games I'm most fond of are Monster Hunter 2, Freedom Unite, and 4 Ultimate. I've always been very critical of the 5th gen games and tend to rate them much lower than most of the other games that came before. Going into Wilds, I would say my expectations were very medium. I'm not a doomer. I was quite hopeful that Wilds would be something I could enjoy a lot, but I didn't want to have high expectations. Well, having played the beta now, I can say that my concerns were entirely unfounded. I said in a previous video that I thought many of Wild's announced features sounded similar to DOS, and I actually could not have anticipated just how right I was. So let's start with some fundamentals. I played most of the weapons in the beta for at least a couple hunts, except Insect Glaive and Hunting Horn, since I've never really played those in any game. I like every weapon that I played. This is huge for me because there were many weapons in Rise especially that I did not vibe with the playstyle of. The biggest standout among all of them is definitely Gunlance. This has got to be the most fun iteration of Gunlance in the whole series. It really maintains the identity of the weapon and builds off the basics of pokes, slashes, and shelling, which is great to see. All the new full burst combos feel great to use, and the massive Wyvern's Fire is goofy but cool. Probably the biggest shocker for me was that I love Wild's Greatsword. Greatsword was classically my main in pretty much every game, and I was very disappointed by the way it was designed in 5th gen overall. True Charge Slash did way too much damage and caused the moveset to be overly centralized around it, meaning you were basically throwing if you weren't just tackling into TCS constantly. My favorite version of Greatsword is back in 2nd gen, where being able to do basic combos and charges is given approximately similar value, so you can maintain pressure on the monster while taking advantage of big openings for charges. Imagine my shock when I saw that Charge Slash, Strong Charge Slash, and TCS have had their damage brought much closer together, and you can even do upswing charges now, meaning you can, in fact, do combos using most of Greatsword's toolkit without sacrificing tons of damage by not using TCS. This was incredible news for me because, based on the original showcase of Greatsword, I was honestly expecting to never touch it in Wilds. I'm very excited to don the old reliable crit draw focus set and enjoy the classic back-to-basics playstyle once again. Some other notable weapon improvements in Wilds are the Longsword, which has had some focus taken away from Foresight Slash and EI counters and given instead to basic attacks and Spirit Slashes with the addition of the Red Meter combo changes. Switch Axe is another weapon that feels very good to play. I've never been a huge Switch Axe player in any game, but I do like to dabble with it, and while there's no major playstyle changes in Wilds, what changes there are make it feel very enjoyable to play, and it's probably one that I'll see myself using a lot in the full game. It really feels like most of the weapon changes in general were focused on getting you to utilize more of the weapon toolkit and avoid pigeonholing you into certain moves. There's also significantly more combo potential where you rarely, if ever, have to stop attacking provided you have an opening for it. One attack can always flow into another one. Since we're on weapons, let's talk about some of the new mechanics. Focus mode and focus strikes are something I was initially a bit hesitant about when it was first shown off. I'm quite pleased to find out that they're actually a very fun mechanic. Popping wounds feels powerful but still balanced, and the moves that you use on them are very fun on every weapon. I played a lot of the beta in multiplayer with my friends, and it was really cool to call out the wounds as they showed up and try to go for them to get the big damage burst. It also feels like a rewarding mechanic to use since many weapons will gain resources from popping the wounds, like Longsword gaining meter or Switch Axe getting amp charge. But again, it doesn't feel too strong because they take time to build up, and you're only going to get so many chances to do it per hunt, so it's not something you can rely on all the time. Offset attacks are another new weapon feature that is shared by a few weapons, and I feel like this one is a bit underrated. It's not that powerful, and it can be a bit hard to get the timing down just right, but they're really fun to pull off. It seems like they can either result in just knocking the monster back or knocking it down briefly, so it's barely even a damage opening. It feels more like a defensive tool, which is great design. Guard clashing is the last new mechanic, and you can probably already guess, but it's a good mechanic. I can't keep getting away with it. How do they manage it? Seriously. You can ram your shield against the monster and blow them up in the face. How cool is that? It seems to work like status or mounting buildup, where you can just guard a certain amount of times and then it'll proc. It doesn't do much other than look awesome. We love to see it. Like I said previously, I had suspected that Wilds might be borrowing some mechanics from DOS, and wow, was I right in ways I couldn't even imagine. The atmosphere of the game is excellent. Heading out from camp to go explore the wilderness, collect items, fight the monsters that are around. It's an adventure every time. They seem to have hit a decent middle ground for monster availability. You can post quests for monsters still, but it doesn't let you until you've actually fought one out in the world first. It took ages for me and my friends to slay right out because we kept losing and then had to wait until a storm happened to try again. It was great. It literally felt like we were back in DOS. What a time to be alive. In other good news, cooking and grilling are back to being real mechanics after a stint of being almost completely vestigial in 5th gen. Not only is it a real mechanic that requires you to own specific ingredients to cook with and make combos, but it's also just very visually appealing with each ingredient being present in the cooking animation. One really unexpected DOS mechanic I never could have seen coming was monster levels. If you're not aware of what monster levels are, in DOS, monsters of a given rank could spawn with plus or minus some amount of base stats, meaning the exact strength of the monster you were fighting had an element of randomness. Well, guess what Wilds has? If you look on the map, you can see a strength level indicated by purple stars, and from a basic observation it seems that it does noticeably affect the monster's damage and HP. This is an absolute insane mechanic to bring back, and it remains to be seen how deep it's going to go in the full game, but the fact that it exists at all is mind-blowing. Like, in DOS, a low-rank monster could literally spawn with high-rank stats, and the game just told you to go get fucked, idiot. Obviously, in Wilds, you can see the strength of the monster ahead of time and choose to engage, but you can damn well bet I'll choose to engage every single time. We love to get fucked, idiot. As someone who was not a fan of Palamutes in Rise, I've been pretty pleased by the functionality of the Sacred. It's a non-combat NPC, and I think its functions support the gameplay pretty well. I prefer to control it manually, but the auto-move mode is useful for when you're busy trying to check the map or use items. The supply pouch takes the place of the box and gets filled with items periodically on long expeditions. The world is a lot of fun to explore, and they seem to have taken all the best parts of World's living ecosystem and then turned it up to 11. One of the things I find most interesting is how turf wars can actually happen regardless of your presence, compared to 5th gen where you would have to be present in the same room for it to happen. Things like this give the feeling that the world exists outside of you, like this ecosystem would continue to exist and function even if you weren't here. This is an extremely powerful aspect of immersion. Speaking of immersion, let's talk the HUD. The health bar has been changed so that it animates in response to danger. It looks like a heart rate monitor and will spike when you get low on health, when a monster is doing a big attack, or when you're in danger of dying to an incoming attack. I've seen this be a contentious design choice. Many people seem to find it distracting or unappealing, and I do think there should be a toggle to turn it off if you want. However, let me tell you, I do not agree with that sentiment at all. The health bar spike is actually a genius blend of game mechanics and immersion. No longer are we plagued with NPCs shouting about a big one incoming. Instead, the health bar simulates your hunter's response to fear and danger. This is especially brilliant because it isn't even accurate. You don't have to be in range of an enemy's attack for it to go off. You just have to see it doing a big attack, and your hunter will respond to the danger either way. I think this is such a fantastic way to alert the player with tells about monster attacks without being obtrusive and keeping with an immersive theme. There's one important aspect of the beta I've not mentioned yet, and that's the monsters. I spent a lot of time in a beta that only has 4 monsters, so you can probably already guess, but they're all quite good. I'm going to assume that most of them are early game low rank monsters you'll encounter within the first couple hours. They weren't particularly challenging or complex, but in that context it makes a lot of sense. These are your Great Jagras and Kulu-Yaku type monsters. Chadacabra is a great starter monster, I think. He might end up being one of my favorite punching bag monsters. He's a cute little frogman that attacks with his big tongue and slams the ground a lot. He also appears to be relatively docile out in the world, so you can hang out near him. Great monster. Doshaguma is really interesting. He appears to essentially be a tech demo monster. He highlights a lot of the new mechanics in Wilds as part of his fight. He's a pack monster, so you should use the new large dung pod to disperse his pack. He reopens his wounds when he enrages, allowing you to use a lot of focus strikes on him. You can easily offset his attacks because he has slow telegraphs, and he can be guard clashed. He's a literal tutorial monster, and I think he serves that purpose quite well. His fight beyond that is pretty basic, but still engaging. He's got some fun attacks that totally caught me off guard a few times. He feels very erratic and beast-like, which suits his appearance as well. Overall, I think he's a pretty solid monster. Bahara is the only monster that I have some real criticisms of. He's got a lot of good things about him. He's a worm. We love worms. He's got an interesting design, and he fights primarily using digs in ways we haven't really seen before. The main issue is that despite how cool his sand pit and dig attacks are, they're not very dangerous. Opening up sand pits as hazards to drag you down is extremely cool thematically, but I don't think he ever damaged me as a result of it. His digs and attacks feel very untargeted and non-threatening, which I think is something that could be changed. Putting you in a sand pit should absolutely be followed up by a targeted dig where he attempts to drag you further into it. Monsters having really cool attacks but not being able to actually use them effectively is always disappointing and doesn't really make a whole lot of sense. This next part is going to be all glazing, so apologies in advance. You're in the Windward Plains. The storm is raging. Visibility is low. Thunder booming in the distance, lightning striking all around you. Ray Dow swoops down over you, blasting you with his railgun cannon, turning the sand to glass while his epic BGM plays. This monster is so fucking peak. Holy shit. They cooked to an unreasonable degree with Ray Dow. This guy has flagship energy, and he isn't even the flagship. Move over, Zenogre, your services are no longer needed. Genuinely fantastic monster in all regards, and I don't think this guy is even a high tier threat. He's probably going to be like early to mid low rank, I would guess. Ray Dow is the type of monster I wanted to see out of a more advanced weather and season system. He really feels like he's tailored to the storm both thematically and mechanically. It feels like fighting Kushaladora back in Old Gen when he would whip the map into a rainstorm. Overall, I'm feeling pretty good about Wild's roster from just this small lineup. They seem to have some good ideas and are integrating the monsters into the new world systems well. I hope returning monsters are also treated with the suitable amount of respect. I'm very excited to see Yankuku come back specifically. There's one more section to cover here, and that is, of course, how can Wilds be improved? Despite how much I loved the beta, it's not a flawless game by any means. I think my biggest immediate complaint that was very apparent as soon as I started playing was the hit effects for weapons. I think this has already been talked about by many people, but pretty much every weapon feels very rubbery. There's a distinct lack of hit stop and additional particle and graphical effects to go along with your hits. If you turn off numbers, it can be hard to tell you even landed a hit at all. Hit stop can be a messy thing to judge because it's based on sharpness and hit zone values as well, and we don't know what type of hit zones we're dealing with in the beta, and we're fighting with green sharpness. But I can say by basic observation that it certainly feels like there's less hit stop on most attacks, even taking those things into consideration. I do think it's worth pointing out that it seems like the hit effects on the weapon showcases they did some months ago actually looked better than what's in the beta. This could indicate that the beta is a very old build, and more recent dev builds of the game are already improved in this regard. It's hard to say. Either way, this is something I hope will be improved in the full game. Secondly, and this is sort of the elephant in the room I feel, performance. If you're watching this, you may be one of the people who couldn't play the beta because your PC could barely run it. PS5 performance appeared to be unpolished, which isn't extremely unexpected all things considered, but PC performance specifically seemed to be really bad. I myself met the recommended specs and was able to run it on medium graphics with around 40 to 50 FPS, and with DLSS on, it felt like 60. This is alright for me, but there are reports of people with very high-end rigs being unable to run the game and people meeting the minimum specs also having problems. People are understandably concerned due to the Dragon's Dogma 2 situation that happened a while ago. Dragon's Dogma 2 had its own reasons for poor performance, so of course you can't actually compare the two and make assumptions that Monhun will be the same, but I get why people are paranoid. I would chalk up a lot of the problems to just a lack of PC optimization having happened yet. Like I said before, I think this beta is actually quite old. It was being played at conventions months ago, and by media behind closed doors before that. It's possible and likely this build was 6 months old or more. I'm personally going to save doomsaying about the state of the PC version until we get a full demo closer to release, If many of these problems persist, then that's definitely cause for concern, but I do have confidence that many, if not all of them, will be resolved by the full release. It's something to keep an eye on going forward, regardless. Okay, I have to get my boomer glasses on for this one, but can we get friendly fire back, please? It appears they took out being able to fling your teammates for every weapon except hammer. I've always thought flinch free was kind of a cringe skill, and having friction between teammates was a good design, but now they've gone even further in removing any last dregs of having to actually pay attention to your teammates. I know that there's basically no hope this is going to be changed, but I really disagree with the direction post 4th gen Monster Hunter has taken in focusing the multiplayer experience on frictionless random matchmaking hunts over playing with your friends. I feel like the antics and hijinks that come from being able to mess with people is part of what makes multiplayer a better experience. Finally, my last concern for Wilds is honestly just that it seems too good to be true. My hopes for the future of Monhun were somewhat low after 5th gen, and the Wilds beta impressed me immeasurably. Like, is this really made by the same people? I had said in a previous video that Monster Hunter has had sudden shifts in design before, so I suppose it's not that shocking this could happen. Regardless, I do have some minor anxiety in the back of my mind that they're going to undo all these great mechanics when I play the full game. I've already seen people say they want the Greatsword changes undone because TCS needs to be the strongest attack, or to make focus strikes an independent instead of shared mechanic, so I can only hope the devs keep to their own vision. In conclusion, I think Monster Hunter Wilds looks to be an absolute banger of a game. For those of us with old-gen preferences, we may be entering a new golden age of Monster Hunter, and I do not say that lightly. The monsters are cool, the weapons are fun, the world is fantastic, the overall atmosphere of the game is the best it's been in a long time. My time with the beta was spent in constant joy. I could have spent another 20 hours in it easily. I think when the game comes out, we're in for a truly legendary experience that both old and new fans of the series will enjoy. That's all from me for now. See ya.